Welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about two books I read recently, For Whom the Bell Tolls and Man's Search for Meaning. For Whom the Bell Tolls is a novel, a short novel, about an American Spanish teacher who is helping fight in the Spanish Civil War on the side of the communist, or I think they're called Republicans also in this story, but of course they're not like American Republicans, they're socialists or communists. I understand that the story is at least somewhat autobiographical, since Ernest Hemingway did report on that war, and he must have had some experiences in Spain at that time, and talked to some people who were there. The idea that some of these accounts might be based on truth gives the story a kind of chilling factor to it. The plot of the book is really simple. It starts in the first few pages. Robert Jordan, the main character, is told that he must blow up a bridge. He's a munitions expert, as well as being a Spanish teacher, and he's given some dynamite and a trigger, and he just has to take it to a bridge and blow it up at the right time. And the whole book is just about him trying to do that from a plot sense. In a story sense, it's much more complex. The themes of the story and the actual things that go on inside the characters' minds and souls. I'd say one of the main themes is about it's just about war, about killing for the sake of a cause that you believe in. Throughout the story, Robert Jordan, the main character, reflects on how awful it is to kill people. He doesn't take any joy in it, and he regrets doing it, but he knows that he has to because he believes in the cause, and he never has any explicit doubts about whether what he's doing is the right thing, but he constantly doubts whether it's moral, or rather that he knows that it's bad to kill people, even if they are fascists, as he calls them, and yet he sees other people on his side, the other Republicans, who are taking some kind of joy in the killing. A lot of the prose is Robert Jordan's inner thoughts and his arguments with himself over what is moral, what is right, or what he should do. He rarely has to make any actual decisions. He's just trying to think through how he's going to deal with this, or how can he justify these certain actions. And he's got a very interesting way of thinking. It's fascinating to follow his train of thought. The other main characters are mainly his fellow Republicans in the guerrilla unit that he's in, whose mission he shares to blow up the bridge. When I told a few people that I know that I was reading For Whom the Bell Tolls, a lot of them noted that it was Hemingway's best written female character. One of his fellow unit members, called Pilar, as a sort of middle-aged, possibly aging lady who's been married to several bullfighters in her life, and she's a very impassioned hater of fascists. She tells this amazing story that is so horrible it always has to be true, of the day when the Republicans rose up and killed all of the fascists in her town, and the horror of it. The whole book is full of these very detailed and fascinating descriptions of human behaviour and the evils that humans are capable of, and the way that they justify these things themselves. Ernest Hemingway, the author, said something interesting in relation to his famous story, The Old Man and the Sea, which I actually haven't read, but lots of people have tried to find symbols in that story with the old man, the sea, and the lad, and what they represent. But he says, and I'm not quoting him directly, I don't remember what the exact quote, but he says that it's not right to write a story with symbols in mind, to think of your characters as a representation of society or representation of time, or to be a symbol for anything. You just have to write the old man as much like an old man as you can. You write the sea as much like the real sea as you can, and you write the boy just as much as like a real young boy. And if you write really well, then you write them realistically enough, then the meaning that comes out of that story is, you can find a lot of different meanings to it. And I think that's really good writing advice, although I'm, of course, not any kind of writer. I really felt that way reading For Whom the Bell Tolls, because he wasn't writing it as a Republican supporter or a fascist hater. He was just writing it from the perspective of a real Republican with flaws and surrounded by these other impassioned Republicans who were also flawed, and some of them were evil people. He's not writing it like anti-fascist propaganda. He humanizes the fascists who are killed quite a lot, or the ones who aren't killed even, and he makes the death of each fascist into a tragedy to varying extents. I mean, that is the meaning of the title, the ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. No malice in Ireland, etc. I don't know the exact poem. That's a poem about how the death of any individual is a tragedy, regardless of who they are or what they believe, and I really do think that's true. It's hard to talk about this book without talking about the ending, so if you haven't read it, and you should, and you want to, then skip to the timestamp that I'm going to show on the screen now, just a minute from now, and you can watch my review of the next book. Probably the most important character, other than the main character, is Maria, who's a young girl who Robert Jordan starts a romantic relationship with. The story doesn't take place over a very long time, it's just a few days, I think less than a week, but the romance that these two characters share is very much a prominent feature of the story. There are a lot of things in the story that Robert Jordan thinks over and doubts and argues with himself about, but he never questions that he loves Maria. He never second guesses himself on that front. He loves her, and he wants to survive the war so that he can live with her in Madrid, and they make all these plans together of what their life is going to be like after the war, although he doesn't know if he'll survive or not. At the end of the story, Robert Jordan is shot off his horse as he tries to escape from some fascists. He has some time before he dies to consider all that's happened in the story leading up to that part, and to contemplate his own suicide, because he must kill himself to prevent being captured and tortured and giving up the information that he knows. And in that time, not just after being shot, but before that, when he suspects that he's going to die, he won't survive the war, and when he knows he's going to die, he constantly comes back to this idea that the few days that he's had with Maria are the luckiest thing that's happened in his life, and that even though he has to die, he feels that he was lucky to have found romance, to find love before his death. He thinks to himself that many people die without ever finding this kind of happiness in their life, so he should be thankful that he got just a few days of this joy that he shared with Maria. I think it kind of sounds cheesy when I say it, but I don't think it's cheesy when you actually read the words Hemingway uses to describe it. I started reading the book thinking that it was going to be a book about war and about death and killing, and it was, but what I wasn't expecting was this romantic subplot, and I think it's so much of a plot feature that you cannot even call it a subplot. It's more of just, it's almost the plot of the story is this love affair, and the kind of sadness that comes with knowing that Robert Jordan dies and he never gets to live the life that he planned with Maria. But this is getting pretty dark now, so I'm going to switch gears and start talking about a book about the Holocaust. It's a book about psychology by Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. His school of psychology is called logotherapy. Logo or logos, it's Greek for the meaning or the word. Logotherapy is based around the idea that people must be in search of meaning or have some meaning in their lives to justify the suffering. Hence the title, Man's Search for Meaning. Makes a number of really interesting observations about his own psychological state and the psychological state of his fellow prisoners and the guards to some extent. in the various camps that he was imprisoned in. I'd say one of the main points of this book is the idea that it was his meaning in life that kept him alive. He witnessed a lot of people who didn't survive, who he observes were those who had nothing to live for outside the camp, or who didn't believe they would ever get out. It's hard to keep living when there's nothing better to look forward to. And the life in the camps was so hard that it needed an extraordinarily powerful meaning to justify that kind of suffering, and to just continue living every day was a battle, and it would have been easier just to give up and die, as so many people did. But he thinks his other survivors were able to overcome all of their difficulties because of this logos, this meaning in their lives. And to me, that's just really interesting. And although he doesn't specifically go into what his meaning in life was that was sustaining for him, he does talk a lot about how thinking of his wife and his love for his wife is what kept him going for some of it. I'll just read you a quote from this. "A thought transfixed me. For the first time in my life I saw the truth as it is set into song by so many poets, proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers, the truth, that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is through love and in love. I understood how a man who has nothing left in this world still may know bliss, be it only for a brief moment, in the contemplation of his beloved. In a position of utter desolation, when man cannot express himself in positive action, when his only achievement may consist of enduring his sufferings in the right way, an honourable way. In such a position, man can, through loving contemplation of the image he carries of his beloved, achieve fulfilment. For the first time in my life I was able to understand the meaning of the words, 'The angels are lost in perpetual contemplation of an infinite glory.'" He goes on to explain how just thinking of his wife and having imaginary conversations with her was a relief to him in his suffering. When he was marching in the snow and mud to the work that he had to do every day, he would just lose himself in these imaginary conversations with his wife, and he didn't even believe that she was alive, and later it turned out that she wasn't any longer alive. But he said that just the thought of her, even knowing that she was probably not alive, was enough to alleviate his suffering somewhat. And that's something that I wasn't expecting to read in this book. It's considered quite cliche and corny and naive to say that love is the meaning of life, especially if we're talking about romantic love. These days, I think a lot of people are very cynical about love due to the high divorce rates and the sort of hookup culture. These kinds of proclamations about love are usually only reserved for romantic films, or even children's films sometimes, like a Disney film. I didn't really expect to find that sort of thing in such a serious book about human suffering. I sort of thought that love would be one of those things that humans aspire to after all of their other needs are met, that all of their hunger and thirst and their need for shelter and safety, after those were met, perhaps love was like a luxury that you could add on top of that. Here he talks about it as the ultimate aspiration in life, to love someone and to be loved. And he doesn't specify whether that is exclusively romantic love, or if he's talking about all kinds of love, familial love or friendship. Certainly he does also talk about friendship in the book, and the way that his relationship to some of his other fellow prisoners was very helpful to him, and how much he cared about the well-being of the other people, even though it was constantly a struggle just to survive himself. I suppose that's the unifying theme of For Whom the Bell Tolls and Man's Search for Meaning, is this idea of love as not just a Disney film fairy tale idea, but as a very meaningful concept can bring joy when nothing else does. But my phone's running out of battery now, so I have to stop filming. I hope that was interesting. I really don't know. I think both of these books were good. If you only want to read one, definitely read For Whom the Bell Tolls, but I also recommend Man's Search for Meaning as well. Thank you for watching as always, and please let me know if you have read these, what you thought of them. Next time I'm going to be talking about The Road to Wigan Pier, which I'm reading at the moment. It's a very interesting read, so read that if you want to be up to date with the Polar Person Book Club, and I'll see you again soon.